In this episode, I sit with Member of Parliament Daniel Molokele to unpack one of the most important civic debates currently happening in Zimbabwe. I certainly have been learning because, as you hear me in the episode, I am asking questions from the position of the citizens, from the position of those individuals who are wondering what is going on, what role do I play, and actually being able to hear this from a member of parliament is really important. So first key takeaway that I got personally was the Zimbabwean constitution, the fact that it was adopted through a national referendum after years of public consultation. So if that was the case and it was born through the people, then it should be, the question becomes, shouldn't it ultimately go back to the people? Which is something that we are all wrestling with in saying, well, we have a say, we want a say, and throughout this 90 days, we are all debating, deliberating, and adding our voices. The second is that there is an issue of a conflict of interest where parliamentarians are being asked to vote on extending their own term from 2028 to 2030. So then, is it possible for them to be standing for the people, or are they going to stand for their own interest? I would assume that they're wanting to stand for their own interest. And lastly, the process matters. And actually, the first thing that you will hear Honorable Molokele suggest is that we need to revisit the SADC Observer Mission Report and look at what was said in regards to the 2023 elections, especially with some of the concerns that were raised and the recommendations that were given, which I certainly, soon after recording, was very inquisitive about and wanting to know more, but more specifically in line with the amendment or the clause that talks about the changes that they want to make to the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission and what that means for us moving forward, especially if there are certain recommendations that came out of the 2023 elections that still haven't been applied. It is a conversation that is worth in investing your 40 to an hour long time into, but please, most of all, share and encourage them to take action as a result of what they hear from this conversation, because ultimately what comes out for me is, as a citizen, you must stand up and you must take action because your voice matters more than everything. I hope you enjoy this episode. MP Molokele, thank you so much for being here with me. Of course, as you know, the biggest conversation that is happening, even as we speak right now, is the debate around the Constitution. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on the constitutional amendments that are currently going on and what you have been seeing, especially being an MP. And I know that your speciality is around constitutional amendments, so I'll be interested to hear your thoughts on what's going on at this current moment.
Thank you so much, Ruru, for inviting me to your podcast. It's always good to have opportunity to engage the public on this very fundamental issue because it regards the national direction and national destiny. I think first and foremost, as a parliamentarian, as a legislator, I need to highlight the fact that when we are talking about the constitution, we're talking about a homegrown constitution that was adopted in 2013 after several years of robust and dynamic local level public consultations. We had COPAC for 2 years, mobilizing views of Zimbabweans. And when we voted in a referendum. 90-something% of the voters voted yes. So this is an example of a homegrown constitution, bearing in mind that for most of our existence were mostly guided by the 1979 Lancaster House Constitution that was negotiated in London. So this 2013 Constitution, which is barely 13 years old, was as a result of public consultation respecting the will of the citizens of Zimbabwe. So as we start this conversation, we must recognize the fact that any fundamental changes to this 2013 Constitution must return to the people of Zimbabwe. The citizens of Zimbabwe must be given a formal public process that allows them to engage with the proposed changes to the Constitution. And in terms of constitutional law and practice, the only credible way to do that is through a public referendum process where citizens are given an opportunity to vote in their millions across the country to show that they are supporting or opposing any particular fundamental change to the Constitution. Having said that, I also need to locate the current constitutional process to say that fundamentally, it is not an agenda being driven by the citizen of Zimbabwe. It has not been coming from a pressure from the citizens themselves. It is coming from the higher echelons of power. And to that extent, it is coming directly from the governing part of Zimbabwe, ZANU-PF. So what we are dealing with essentially in terms of origin, we are dealing with ZANU-PF managing its succession politics. Under normal circumstances, ZANU-PF has annual conferences, and then in 2027, after every 5 years, they have a congress where they elect a new leadership, and part of the elections lead to the election of a new leader for ZANU-PF. So if ZANU-PF were to follow their own constitution, in 2027, they will elect a new leader, and then it is that leader who can then be the candidate for ZANU-PF for 2028 elections, as provided for by the constitution. So right now, there is a clear effort to circumvent the succession process of ZANU-PF by going to the national constitutional setup and using the national constitution to block the succession process of ZANU-PF. Because if we follow due process in ZANU-PF, Emmerson Mnangagwa is supposed to step down as the leader of ZANU-PF in 2027. And then in 2028, he's supposed to step down as the leader of the country. ZANU-PF will produce a new candidate who can contest for presidents. So that is the crux of the matter. We are trying to resolve a ZANU-PF succession issue where a particular individual or leader in ZANU-PF is being blocked from being the next candidate from ZANU-PF to contest for president of Zimbabwe. And now we are being forced to get involved in the succession battles of ZANU-PF. The people of Zimbabwe never sort of agitated or campaigned for a change. These changes are coming from the top to the bottom. And more importantly, because these changes are coming through parliament, they have a serious fundamental flaw. You cannot, in all political honesty and integrity, ask a parliamentarian like myself, who contested in 2023 under the same constitution, and I was away from the day I was announced as the winner of the election, that my term of office is going to last for 5 years. And after 5 years, I would need another election to extend my stay in parliament or give another politician an opportunity to represent the people in my constituency. Then as the term of office progresses already over halfway through, I am asked as a parliamentarian to vote whether to extend my term of office by 2 more years from 2028 to 2030. That's a serious conflict of interest. And an average parliamentarian will be forced to vote in favor of the motion because it extends their stay in power illegally, because they were supposed to last for 5 years. Who wouldn't want an extra bonus 2 years just by voting for it in parliament without even consulting the voters who in 2023 did not give you the mandate to last beyond 5 years. So that is a fundamental disrespect of the voters, of the constituents, of the citizens of the country. So as a parliamentarian, I'm strongly embarrassed beyond measure that I am being asked to vote and there is an assumption that I'm neutral. There is no way I can be neutral. I have a serious conflict of interest. So we cannot change this constitution, especially extending my term of office, without involving the people of my constituents. And that is the reason why, as a parliamentarian, I'm saying, yes, a constitution can be changed at any time, but we cannot rely on parliamentarians who stand to benefit to change the constitution. If we are being honest, the constitutional process must involve a public referendum that allows citizens of this country to make the choices. And then if the citizens of Zimbabwe vote overwhelmingly to extend the term of office by 2 years, then we can start talking. For now, this is clearly a serious breach of respect of the people of Zimbabwe. So as a parliamentarian, I'm strongly opposed to extending my stay in office without involving the people of my constituents, as the case it is right now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your honesty and your just you being very transparent to say, look, this is a conflict of interest for myself, and I don't think many MPs would have the level of integrity that you're showing in this moment. And I'm just curious to hear from you, especially as it pertains to the citizens, because you know the current situation in Zimbabwe, majority of the Zimbabwean citizens don't understand the process within Parliament. They don't understand exactly where did this even come from? At what point did this even begin in terms of them wanting to change the constitution? So I'm interested to hear from you, given that I'm sure you've seen, you've heard, when did this actually start? Because when I'm looking at the constitution, the 2021, certain things that have been repealed, is that the point when this started being in progress? Could you just enlighten us a little bit more on that?
Yeah, like I said at the start, that the 2013 constitution is different from the Lancaster House constitution, where we had representatives meeting in London to negotiate a new constitution. The 2013 constitution is a people-driven constitution. So there is no evidence that the individual citizens of this country have openly requested for all these changes. We just had a ZANU-PF conference coming up with some of the changes, because if you look at the gazetted bill and what the ZANU-PF conference discussed, there are a lot of other proposed changes that were never even discussed at the ZANU-PF conference. So ZANU-PF is a political party. It cannot on its own become a representative of the will of the people. So they are free as ZANU-PF to come up with a resolution to change the constitution. Where there is a fundamental fight is that proposal to change the constitution is not being taken to the people of Zimbabwe. So that's why the test of public acceptance must come through a national referendum. As things stand right now, this is a private process of a political party, and within that political party, some specific individuals managing their succession politics. So at the end of the day, there is no legitimate proof that the people of Zimbabwe agitated for any change of this constitution at this moment in time.
And when it comes to the referendum, the common thing that I keep hearing is that, well, if they were able to allegedly rig the election in 2023, what confidence do we have that they're not going to use the same level of tactics to within the referendum? What provisions do the citizens have, or what confidence do the citizens have, from your opinion?
I think we're mixing up two issues. There is the process, or what you call the due process, and then there's the risk of that process being abused. So where we are where the politicians are avoiding the due process, because we cannot debate whether it's going to be rigged or not. We should actually agree whether is it necessary to have a referendum to do fundamental changes to the constitution. Once we agree, then we talk about making sure that that referendum process is free and fair. So for now, the debate is not whether the referendum is going to be free and fair. The debate is, do we need to have a referendum or not? And the political elite are saying there is no need to have a referendum. The people of Zimbabwe will be represented by the parliamentarians. And the parliamentarians are being asked to represent the people, while at the same time, the same constitutional amendment bill is saying their term of office is going to is going to be extended from 2028 to 2030. So that is where the political morality issue is, the political integrity issue is. Parliamentarians are not the right people to decide whether there should be any changes to this constitution, because they stand to benefit from the same constitutional amendment. So they are not neutral. So let's take this constitutional proposal to the people of Zimbabwe. And then once we start to organize the referendum, we start to talk about whether that referendum is being done procedurally correctly and fight against any chance of rigging it.
And who is to do this process of taking it to the people, if already, like you're saying, there is a conflict of interest here? So what must the citizens be doing to ensure that this comes to them to make that decision?
Like I'm saying, the Constitution of Zimbabwe actually allows for changes. It's got several provisions that allow for changes to the Constitution. The most important point around those changes is that any proposal can be made at any time to change the Constitution. So that is not the problem. That proposal must get into a test of public acceptance or rejection. That's where you go through the Constitution and you will find there are clauses on how to conduct a referendum. And that referendum, once it's conducted and the citizens support or vote in favor of the changes to that Constitution being changed, then that parliament can then be used to endorse the recommendations of the public, of the citizens. This is where the fundamental conflict is. It's not at the level of whether a constitution can be changed or not. It's how it can be changed. And we cannot allow individual politicians to go ahead and change the constitution fundamentally, including extending their own term of office, because MPs are going to benefit directly from this change. So they are seriously conflicted. They do not have the moral credibility to be neutral.
And MP, I'm coming from a very not being knowledgeable at all here. Obviously, hearing bits and pieces here and there. I've done a little bit of research, but still very uneducated as a citizen, what is the process? So, of course, this bill has been gazetted, and then we've been told that it is 90 days. Could you just talk through, for those people who don't know at all, what the process is, where things are at the moment, just to actually break them down in a teaching way, to just help them to understand what the steps that have happened so far and what the steps are to come into, so that we are very clear? Because I've not heard anyone sort of break it down in a way that's understandable, if that makes sense.
It's okay. So let's start with the origin. The origin is a ZANU-PF conference in Bulawayo 2 years ago, where a resolution was pushed that the term of office of the president is supposed to be extended until 2030. Using the ZANU-PF legal department, that process was transferred to the Attorney General's office. The Attorney General's office has come up with extra changes to the Constitution, including one specific amendment to say that the Zimbabwe Gender Commission will now be part of the Human Rights Commission. It will no longer be a standalone institution. So these changes that have been suggested are then sent to Cabinet through the Minister of Justice and Parliamentary Legal Affairs. So 2 weeks ago, in the first Cabinet meeting of the year, they were presented to the Cabinet, and the Cabinet was chaired by the president, who is the one who is going to benefit from this change, and the ministers who are going to benefit from this change. So all the people in that meeting were heavily compromised because they were supposed to discuss an extension of their term of office of themselves. Why would they vote against extending their own terms of office? So after the cabinet meeting, the public was told that the cabinet is approved. So cabinet approval has been sought, and then from there, the Speaker of Parliament took to the public and did this week what you call a gazette. So it's the proposals that were approved in cabinet have now been gazetted. Now that they've been gazetted, we have a process of public engagement. It's called a 90-day period where anyone in the public domain can engage on the changes. Maybe there will be radio show, there will be Twitter spaces, there will be public hearings, there will be village meetings. there will be essays, there will be position papers, but people will be contributing towards the relevant committee of parliament that will be facilitating that process. And then after that, it will come back to parliament, and there will be an updated version of the proposal based on the feedback from the public. For example, it's possible that the clause around the Zimbabwe Gender Commission will be removed, so it will no longer be part of the final version. And then there may be other new introductions or changes along the 90 days. Then the National Assembly of Parliament will be given an opportunity to debate the updated version of the bill. And then they'll go through the first reading, second reading, and third reading. And then after that, they'll go clause by clause and vote on each clause. And then once they've gone through the entire constitutional amendment bill, they will be forced to vote. And to vote, they will need a 2/3 majority. Once the 2/3 majority is secured, that change will be endorsed by the National Assembly, which is the lower house, and then it will be referred to the upper house, which is the Senate. And the Senate will also go through the whole process again of first reading, second reading, third reading, debate over that issue, and they might change some of the parts of the bill. And then they will be forced to vote also. And then after that, we will have the adoption. There are some instances where they say, no, we have to have a joint sitting of both the lower house and the upper house so that they vote for the constitutional amendment. And we need 2/3 of the both lower house and upper house. After that, the updated version, after the 2/3 majority sought in parliament, will be handed over to the president for assent. The president may refer it back to the parliament, or you may sign it off. Once you sign it off, it's gazetted as a new law. That means the constitution has been changed in line with the bill.
Thank you for breaking that down. And I'm curious, in terms of the bodies that will be handling this, is there also a conflict of interest in throughout the process? Where are we likely to find challenges as citizens in terms of being able to have people who are actually representing us as opposed to individuals who are compromised through this process?
For me, the starting point is the fact that we are coming from a cycle of disputed elections. The public, especially after the last 2 or 3 elections, they have lost faith in the credibility of the election process. But what is fundamentally important is that the SADC Observer Mission Report for 2023 elections clearly articulated that Zimbabwe conducted elections in 2023 that were below the minimum guidelines that have been adopted by SADC for free and fair elections. So SADC made sure that they were very clear in that Observer Mission Report that Zimbabwe failed to meet the minimum standards, and they condemned the quality of the elections. So as we speak, the outcome of the 2023 elections was already compromised because SADC refused. Zimbabwe was the first member country of SADC to conduct an election of that such level importance and not get endorsement from SADC. And if you go to the SADC Observer Mission Report, towards the end, there is a recommendation section that talks about reforms that are needed to increase or improve the neutrality of all election institutions, including the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, the Zimbabwe Broadcasting Corporation, the Zimbabwe United Passenger Company, the Zimbabwe Republic Police. All these institutions are very critical in the election process of Zimbabwe. And the SADC Observer Mission Report has condemned their role in the 2023 elections. They were clearly being used as an extension of the governing party or ruling party campaign resources. And the opposition were not allowed to benefit from the same opportunities that the ZANU-PF candidates were getting, especially, for example, when it comes to the state broadcaster ZBC, the Zimbabwe Broadcasting Corporation. It was blatantly biased in favor of ZANU-PF. So the Observer Mission Report made recommendations that up to today have not been adhered to. So as we speak, that will be the starting point to say, at least let us meet the minimum guidelines as recommended by the SADC Observer Mission Report, which is now an official document of SADC. It was adopted at a SADC summit. So for Zimbabwe to hold a credible process, whether it's a referendum, whether it's a by-election, whether it's an election, they must start by looking at the recommendations of this Observer Mission Report and try to meet the expectation. Then they can pass the test of electoral integrity or electoral credibility. So that is where the fight is, to say, can we make sure that we make reforms in line with the recommendations of a peer review report from the SADC, which Zimbabwe is a proud member.
And in terms of then the role that the citizens should be playing in this process of disputing what happened in 2023, looking at this report, because I've read the report, I thought it was very useful, especially that bit at the end, especially when he talks about even just highlighting clauses, or rather things that they identified to be an issue with the previous election, certain things that I wouldn't have considered myself as a citizen. But it's interesting to hear you say that actually now this is something that we need to go back, we need to review. And I certainly want to read it again, because now if I try to think of what exactly it says, I'm realizing I go blank. So I'm just curious from your perspective, other than us going back and reading this document, what's your advice to citizens on how they can participate in this?
Okay, so citizens are the custodian of the national constitution. So for the constitution to come alive, it must be enforced by the citizens. Politicians cannot be trusted to enforce the constitution because they have a vested interest, they have a conflict of interest. So if the SADC Observer Mission Report has got recommendations, those recommendations need to be implemented through public pressure from the citizens. And to the extent that the citizens get organized through peaceful action, through petitions, through court actions, through public protest, as protected by Section 59 of the National Constitution, then they are able to put the political pressure to make sure that the SADC Observer Mission Report recommendations are respected. And to that extent, they improve the quality of our elections, or the neutrality or the free and fairness of our elections as a country. So we must start from the election observer mission report, because that's the reason why SADC sent a delegation. They sent a delegation to increase the level of neutrality and credibility, to say you are a member state. Every member state, when they conduct elections, SADC sends an observer mission team. And that mission team that was sent here has managed to make observations and then make recommendations. But when they were asked whether the elections met the minimum guidelines of free and fair elections according to SADC, they clearly said they failed. So Zimbabwe is the first member state of SADC to conduct an election, and the SADC Observer Mission Report condemns. And when the SADC summit was held, the report was not changed, it was adopted. So the report is actually a check for Zimbabwean citizens to cash in and assert their rights as citizens, because an international peer review process has certified that Zimbabwe did not hold a free and fair election. So the responsibility lies with citizens of Zimbabwe to get organized, to get mobilized, and say, we are using the SADC Observer Mission Report, we are using a neutral report that Zimbabwe is a member of. And they have recommendations after observations about how we failed to meet the minimum guidelines of free and fair elections. And we start from there.
And could you just explain a little bit more on what they're trying to change as it pertains to ZEC? Because I just did a quick search in regards to the SADC recommendations that you mentioned, the SADC Election Observer recommendations. And one of the things mentioned here is independence and capacity of the Electoral Commission. So the recommendation was to strengthen the operational independence of the ZEC, Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, suggestions to improve election planning and logistics, ballot distribution systems, communication with stakeholders, and also to address delays that affected polling in urban areas. Now, if the bill currently is then saying or suggesting that they want to make changes to ZEC, what does that actually mean? also in consideration of this recommendation?
So again, everyone has got a lot of issues around ZEC, and the SADC Observer Mission Report also raised a lot of red flags, including the fact that the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission was advised to provide the final voters' roll to all stakeholders in a timely manner to allow for voter roll inspection and verification. So you will be surprised that when elections were conducted, most of the candidates were not even aware of the actual voters' roll. Maybe there are two different voters' roll, one for the ruling party, one for the opposition. So at the end of the day, the voters' roll itself is a key element in election result dispute. So in the original election system until 2013, the Registrar General's office under Tobayo Amdede was responsible for the voters' roll. When the constitutional reform process started, people said they would rather have the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission being in charge of that. That's why it removed the Registrar General. Now they are saying, let's go back to where we're coming from, where the Registrar General is in charge of the voters' roll, and the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission is no longer in charge. Not only that, they are also creating a new organ, an institution called Zimbabwe Delimitation Commission, which also reduces the role of the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission because it focuses only on the delimitation of constituencies, which is supposed to happen every 10 years after our national population census. Zimbabwe is a system that every 10 years, 1982, 1992, 2002, 2012, 2022, 2032, we will have a national population census, and that then influences the demarcation of constituencies, because we not only use geography to create constituencies or wards, we also use the number of population or voters in that particular area. So it's important to say that, yes, there is need for a debate around any part of the constitution, including the role of ZEC, because even the Observer Mission Report requested for reforms with regards to the independence and neutrality of ZEC. So for that to happen, whatever change that will happen, let it not be limited to the Parliament of Zimbabwe. That's the appeal. Let it not be limited to the Parliament of Zimbabwe. Let it go to the public. Because the public have a say, and how do they have a say? They vote in a referendum, and they say, we support this or we don't support this. Because MPs are a small group of people, and they are amenable to influence, especially now that they are aware that the extension of term of office is not just for the president, but it's across the board. It's for councillors, it's also for MPs. So they have a serious conflict of interest.
Thank you so much. And as we begin wrapping up here, I'm just interested to hear, firstly, your advice to citizens who feel that they're backed into a corner, and that no matter what it is that they try, that the game is already rigged in all areas, whether that is in them wanting to raise their voices, in them wanting to protest, or whatever action that they want to take. I think there's often this feeling where many people feel, Sakatnoita say, what can we do? There's always that sense. So just any encouragement that you have for anyone who's feeling like they don't have a voice or they cannot take any action. But also, if you could talk a little bit more about yourself, your experience, and what you are doing to stand with the people during this period.
So let me start by saying, in 1997, I was a student leader. I was the vice president of the University of Zimbabwe Students' Union. I was the vice president of the Zimbabwe National Students' Union. And the constitutional movement was started, and as students, we joined it. It's called the National Constitutional Assembly, where we said, let's agitate for constitutional reform. And that process led to, in 1999, to the setting up of the Constitutional Commission. And then in 2000, there was a referendum where constitution was rejected. That process encouraged Zimbabweans to have a say in their constitutional process. In 2006, 7, 8, there was another campaign where citizens mobilized called Save Zimbabwe Campaign. And it was through that campaign that we managed to have some changes to the constitution, including the harmonized elections in 2008. And then also in 2011, we started the process of a homegrown constitution. So I want to encourage Zimbabweans that if we get organized, all different stakeholders, youth, women, trade unions, students, church leaders, business people, all concerned citizens of Zimbabwe, if we unite as a body and say, we want to have a say on this issue, because the first fight is that as we unite under one movement, our call is that there be a public process of a consultation that allows Zimbabweans to vote and certify their position with regards to any proposed changes to the constitution. The custodian of the constitution is not the politician, is not the parliamentarian. The custodian of the constitution is the citizen, is the individual member of society. So as long as we are making fundamental changes to the constitution, we need citizens to have a say. So it's possible for Zimbabweans to get organized, to mobilize through organized civil society platforms, through court actions. Some of the things are already happening, through political expression. Section 59 of the National Constitution gives each citizen the right to protest. And we can protest under Section 59 across all towns, across all villages, and to say that we want our voice to be heard. And the best way for our voice to be heard is that the consultation process to change the constitution must include a public referendum process where you can even vote as a citizen. And also to extend the term of office. You cannot allow the politicians who are already finishing their term of office to unilaterally extend their own term of office by 2 years. When the voters who gave them the mandate to be councillors, to be presidents, to be mayors, to be parliamentarians, when they voted for them in 2023, there was no doubt that they were voting for them for 5 years. So if they are going to get another 2 years, how do they expect to hand themselves over that extension without the same voters? The voters must give them the opportunity. And the referendum allows the voters to say, it's a good logic, it's a good reasoning, we support it. Can you stay in office for another 2 years? Why are politicians avoiding the referendum? Because they do not trust whether the public or citizens will support them. So they are circumventing. It's a strategy of avoidance. So at the end of the day, we must demand our right as Zimbabweans, as citizens, and politicians will eventually bow down to the pressure like we have seen in the past. As a person, as an individual, I've been working in public office. In 1995, I was a first-year law student at the University of Zimbabwe. I campaigned to be Secretary General, and before the end of that year, in my first year at the University of Zimbabwe, I was elected as the Secretary General. In my second year, I campaigned again. I was elected as the Vice President of the University of Zimbabwe Students' Union. My president was the late Lenmo Judah Jongwe, who was also my classmate at law school. And then in 1998, I was also elected as Zinasu Vice President to the late Lenmo Jongwe. And also, I was elected as the president of the University of Zimbabwe Students' Union. So most of my activities started when I was 20 years old, when I was at campus at University of Zimbabwe. After university, I got involved with civil society, and I was also involved with institutions such as the National Constitutional Assembly. I was also involved with Transparency International Zimbabwe as a staff. I also did legal practice in Bulawayo. And then after 5 years from university, I went to South Africa, where I spent almost 15 years in South Africa, working mostly with civil society organizations and specializing more in public health advocacy. So I'm a former director and a program manager of international NGOs promoting public health in Africa and internationally. I was asked in 2017 to go back to my hometown and campaign by citizens of that town, and I started to campaign, and I got the opportunity to contest in 2018, and I won the election, and I became the member of parliament, and I transferred from South Africa back to Zimbabwe. So I've been in Zimbabwe since 2018, and in 2023, I got another opportunity to campaign, and I won again. So this is my second term since I came back from South Africa, representing the town where I was born, my own hometown, which is Hwange. Hwange is a district, has 3 constituencies, and I am the member of parliament for Hwange Central, which is the central part of the district, which is the mining town part of the district. My parents worked for the mining company, so I grew up under the mining company, the coal mining company. So I've been working in Parliament. This is my second term, and I stand and I say to the people of Zimbabwe, I was voted for a 5-year term, and I expect to leave office in 2028. I can only continue to 2030 after a lawfully conducted referendum. He has clearly explained that the people of Zimbabwe are happy that my term of office be extended to 2030. Right now, my term of office is expiring in 2028, and if there is no referendum prior to that, in 2028, I will submit my resignation and call for a press conference and say to the people of Hwange, my term of office is expired and I'm stepping down. I cannot have these 2 years that have been created by Parliament who have a serious conflict of interest. So we'll end up having a by-election in Hwange to elect a new parliamentarian, and if the people of Hwange want me to go for third term, I'll consider that. But at a personal level, I think 2 terms are enough for me. So I'm ready to allow another person to be the member of Parliament in 2028 for my hometown. And I move to a new challenge in life and continue to contribute to society, to my country in another capacity. I'm not supposed to be a parliamentarian for life. I must also grow as a person and develop my leadership potential and contributions to the country. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate your time today. And I've certainly learned a lot from the discussion that we've had, from, you explaining the constitution, the process, the fact that it's going through Parliament, and even just the inequalities that you're already seeing, and even just appreciate your you being genuine, or you being transparent about what this means. And like you mentioned, the conflict of interest is something that I really took away, that I wouldn't imagine someone in your position actually admitting and saying. So I appreciate all the work that you're doing and the time that you've taken. And even me coming from the perspective of, I'm literally coming from ground zero, having these conversations to try and understand, and hoping that there are people like me who are also having similar questions, clueless, coming from ground zero, wanting to understand. So you breaking these things down is really, really useful. Is there any final things that you'd like to say before we close off?
Yes, I want to say to the people of Zimbabwe, you are masters of your own destiny. Do not allow an individual politician, do not allow a group of politicians to take away your right to decide the future of this country. So please, citizens of Zimbabwe, stand up and be counted. This is not just for the current generation, but it's also for future generations, so that people will know that the citizens of Zimbabwe, they are the legitimate custodians of the national constitution, not individual politicians, not groups of politicians, be it Parliament, be it Politburo. They must not have the final say. So the people of Zimbabwe must assert their rights and make sure that they are the real custodian of the constitution. So do not accept everything that is coming from the politicians. Stand up and be counted. This will be a good precedent for future politicians to know that whenever they want to tamper with the constitution, they have to seek the support of the public first. They should not circumvent public mandate. Thank you so much. May God bless Zimbabwe, and we pray that this strategy of changing the constitution through Parliament fails dismally, and the people of Zimbabwe find ways to take the matter back to the people and not limit it to politicians.
Thank you. And I too will be standing up so that I can be counted. I appreciate your time today, and hopefully we'll speak again very soon.
You're welcome.